Government communication with people in every country in the world is one of the main topics today because they don't share every information with people.
Well, one argument is, you said governments don't share all information. If they want to be trusted, they probably do want to share more information, including when they don't know what's the answer. So one of the countries that often handled the pandemic in communications terms well early on was at expert level, was also acknowledging what we did and we did not know. And I think that was actually effective in relation to a number of countries. That said, there's been a lot of work. COVID has taught governments, if they didn't know it already, that you have to be quite systematic and empirical to work out what's an effective message, what will people listen to. It's no good just sitting in a focus group and saying, everybody likes this poster. Most people won't look at a poster for 3 hours. They're going to see it for 3 seconds. And the question is, what will they actually remember? And if they do remember, will they act on it? So we have run many, I think up to 68 now trials during the period of COVID, on COVID, not only on communications, but to try and work out actually what do people understand, how does it affect their intention. So we can try and be a bit more scientific about government communications to make sure something is understandable, comprehensible. Governments are always going to be in the business of trying to communicate, not just COVID,
but not so good as they should be.
Well, we can always be better, right? So I think that communications has often been seen more as a craft, like a creative thing, and you want to create this wonderful image and so on. Whereas not just because of digital, but other forces, particularly people who study behavior, realize that humans are quite complicated and how they'll respond will be different. So even if we take a very simple example, where we early on trying to get people to wash their hands more often, well, what's an effective poster to get people to wash their hands, and what's an effective message? Well, we also want people to wash their hands, particularly young men, for up to 20 seconds. And the first instinct, to take a very simple example, is that government departments like to put all their brands on it, like Department of Health and so on and so on. And empirically, that can often just distract people. Like they're just reading this text, whereas what's your main message? Can you get the main message across? Or what's the image? And what is the image telling you? So for example, if it's an image which is showing germs, people are more put off by other people's germs than they are their own. So seeing a handprint which implies you should wash your hands because of other people's germs may be more effective than your own. My point about it is you can unpick these things, and then you can actually test it with a sample, say, of a few thousand people, and find out, well, if you see this for 3 seconds, do people understand the message? Do they literally understand it afterwards? And does it in some way influence what they're going to go and do?
What about anti-vax campaigns?
So a big issue, of course, in many countries has been these issue about anti-vax concerns, many of which is understandable that people would have a worry about it. A really important detail is to bear in mind it's very minority, it's a very small proportion of the population, but often a very vocal one. So how do you respond and how do you understand it? So we would do and have been doing work, for example, to look at the remaining populations in a country like the UK is about 10% of people still have yet to have any injection. But they're not all anti-vaxxers, and it's really important to piece them apart. So in fact, there's 3 different groups we find. The majority of people who haven't had an injection in a place like the UK actually are intending to have an injection. So the most important thing you can often do for them is just to make it incredibly easy to take the injection to them, make it as convenient as possible. There are a group of people who are genuinely worriers. They're worried about the effect it'll have on their bodies. They're worried about maybe things from 40, 50 years ago about vaccine trials and are they safe. And for those, you really need a trusted intermediary like their doctor to have a proper conversation to listen to the concerns. And with time, some of those people will decide, actually, I will have the injection. There's also a third group who aren't really anti-vaxxers. They just can't be bothered. They may not believe in the vaccine. They think it won't make a big difference.
They don't believe in coronavirus neither.
They may not believe in coronavirus, or they may think I'm young and fit and it won't affect me. And for those, any amount of persuasion may not do it. It may be because the effect on someone else, or it may be, as in France or many other countries, there's something else which you have to do if you don't get a vaccine, and they'll think, whatever, I don't want to have to keep showing this piece of paper, or here in UAE, you have to get a weekly PCR test, And people just think, well, that's too much bother, I'll go and get the jab for that reason, not because they believe in the injection, but because, so there's three quite different groups there, and you need to understand their differences, and then ideally you want to tailor your response in communications and also support that you give to those groups accordingly.